She didn't look like a monster. She smiled. She spoke softly. And if she walked past you on the street, you'd never think for a second that one of the darkest stories in criminal history was hiding behind that face. But here's the truth. Some of the most dangerous people are exactly the ones who seem the most trustworthy. Karla Homolka was one of them. On the surface, her life looked like anyone else's. An ordinary girl with an ordinary smile and days that, from the outside, seemed completely normal. But many stories begin in a place where no one thinks to look. Not with one big event, but with small things. Boundaries that shift slowly. Decisions that seem insignificant in the moment, but change everything. Karla Leanne Homolka was born on May 4th, 1970, in Port Credit, Ontario. She grew up in St. Catharines, a quiet town near Niagara Falls. 2 younger sisters, parents, a house with a yard. She loved animals. Neighbors described her as polite, bright, a little shy. In high school, she was well-liked, not in a remarkable way, just in the ordinary way. She had friends. She dated. She dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Nothing in her background, her record, or her personality hinted at what was coming. And experts would later say that was exactly what made her dangerous. The most effective predators never announce themselves. But beneath the surface, there were cracks. Karla craved intensity. She was drawn to dominance. She wanted to be chosen, to be special, to be loved by someone unlike anyone else. She was 17 years old when she met Paul Bernardo, and everything changed. You didn't come this far to stop here. Subscribe and go deeper with Obscura Mind. When Karla entered this relationship, no one knew where it was going. At first, everything seemed normal, or at least that's how it appeared. But some relationships aren't just relationships. They become a system. A system where the line between right and wrong slowly disappears. Not all at once, but step by step. Paul Bernardo looked, on the surface, like everything a young woman in the 80s could want. Charming, ambitious, confident. He studied accounting at the University of Toronto, the kind of man who commanded a room the moment he walked in. And underneath all of that charm, a dangerous predator was hiding. Between 1987 and 1990, Paul had been terrorizing women across Scarborough, Ontario. The Scarborough Predator. That's what investigators called the unknown offender. He struck at night. He was methodical. He left almost nothing behind. While investigators searched for him, Paul Bernardo was attending university parties. And at one of those parties, in October 1987, he met Karla Homolka. It was instant. Karla later described it as electric. Paul was everything she'd been looking for. Intense, dominant, completely consuming. What she didn't know, or maybe didn't want to know, was that Paul's darkness wasn't a metaphor. It was real, it was criminal, and it was already hunting. Within months, they were inseparable. Within years, they would cross a line no one comes back from. The things that once seemed unthinkable slowly become something the mind can make peace with. And that's where the real danger begins. Not when the first mistake happens, but when that mistake becomes a pattern. Before we go further, I want to be direct. What this couple did is among the darkest chapters in Canadian criminal history. We won't dwell in graphic detail, but we won't look away either. Because the victims deserve to be remembered, and the truth deserves to be told. The first victim was Tammy Homolka, Karla's own 15-year-old sister. On Christmas Eve 1990, Paul and Karla drugged Tammy using a sedative Karla had taken from her veterinary clinic. While Tammy was unconscious, she was harmed in the most unthinkable way. Karla was there. Karla participated. Tammy never woke up. She was gone before morning. Her death was ruled accidental. No one suspected a thing. The couple attended her funeral together. But they weren't done. In June 1991, they took 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey from outside her home. Leslie was held captive, subjected to unimaginable suffering, and lost her life. Her remains were later found in Lake Gibson. Less than a year later, in April 1992, they took 15-year-old Kristen French, in broad daylight, from a church parking lot. Kristen was held for 3 days. Then she was gone too. Throughout all of it, Paul documented everything on camera, every moment of captivity, with the cold detachment of someone who believed he would never be caught. And Carla was there, not just present, involved. What later became clear about this case wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a pattern where each time boundaries were pushed a little further, and each time the mind found a way to justify it. The question that haunted the courts, the public, and the victims' families for years was simple. How much of this was her choice? By 1993, investigators had been building a case against Paul Bernardo for the Scarborough offenses. DNA evidence had finally connected him to those crimes. But for the disappearances of Leslie and Kristen, they needed more. What they didn't anticipate was that their most important witness would come from inside the house. In January 1993, Carla showed up at her aunt and uncle's home with visible injuries on her face. She said Paul had hurt her badly. She was taken to the hospital. For the first time, the mask slipped. Not Paul's, but the relationships. Carla began talking to investigators, and she offered them something extraordinary. Everything she knew. Prosecutors faced a difficult choice. Without an eyewitness, the case was weak. Carla was offering to be that witness, to testify, to confirm everything. In exchange, she would plead guilty to 2 counts of manslaughter, not murder. The sentence? 12 years. Eligible for early release in 4. Prosecutors accepted. The deal was signed. At the time, they believed Carla was someone who had acted under fear and control. The public was not satisfied. Something about Carla Homolka felt wrong. That composure, that calculated precision. Victims' families were outraged. Legal scholars were divided. But the deal was done. And what came next proved that everyone's instincts had been right. Then the tapes surfaced. Paul Bernardo had hidden recorded footage inside the walls of their home. Investigators had searched the house for months and found nothing. It was Paul's own lawyer who finally located them and handed them over. What was on those recordings changed everything. The footage showed Carla was not a passive, terrified victim. She was an active participant. She assisted. She encouraged. She performed for the camera. Prosecutors had made their deal based on one version of Carla Homolka. The recordings revealed another. But it was too late. The deal was legally binding. The court's hands were tied. Paul Bernardo was convicted of first-degree homicide in 1995. Life in prison, with no possibility of early release for 25 years. Carla Homolka served 12 years. They had bought testimony, and bought it from someone far more dangerous than they ever knew. Where does Carla actually fit in this story? Was she a victim? Or was she part of the darkness? Or perhaps both? Our minds want simple answers, black or white, good or bad. But reality almost always lives somewhere in between. A person can be deeply hurt and still choose to hurt others. And that's exactly where judgment becomes difficult. But there's one truth that cannot be ignored. The past can explain. It cannot justify. No experience, no relationship, and no pain gives anyone the right to destroy another person's life. In July 2005, Carla Homolka walked out of prison. She changed her name. She moved to the Caribbean. She married. She had children. She built a life. Leslie Mahaffey was 14. Kristen French was 15. Tammy Homolka was 15. None of them got that chance. There's a question this case never fully answered. How does a person, step by step, arrive at a place where they no longer recognize themselves in the mirror? And perhaps more unsettling, if boundaries shift far enough, could anyone reach that point? Maybe the answer isn't a comfortable one, but one thing is clear. Darkness rarely arrives all at once. It's built, quietly, step by step, and by the time you notice it, it may already be too late. Some people carry their darkness like a wound, others wear it like a crown. Reality is never the full story. Obscura.